This episode is going to change how you see the world. On this episode of the Crystal Vision podcast, we are joined by Kang Head from the Happier Hustle, a 3 times cancer survivor. She talks us through her journey, how her diagnosis helped her to live fully in the present moment, and how intrinsically our health is linked with our mind. Make sure to share this episode with friends, family, and loved ones, and I hope you get as much out of it as I did. So, without further ado, here is Kang Head. Hello, and welcome to the Crystal Vision podcast, where we dive deep into the strategies and energetics of business, money, and mindset mastery so as to create the next generation of wildly wealthy women. My name is Olivia Clare, and I'm a serial entrepreneur who is obsessed with giving you all of the tools that you need to create your crystal clear vision of success. Each week, you will hone in on your unique zone of genius and embody the highest version of yourself to reverse engineer your way to your dream life. If you're ready to let go of the hustle and effortlessly call in more money, more growth, and more fulfillment, stay tuned. Hi, Casey. Welcome to the Crystal Vision podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. I'm just really grateful to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I want to jump right in because I'm obsessed with your business name, The Happier Hustle. And we hear so much about hustling on social media. There's like it's kind of like gone back a little bit. It's like either you hustle, or self-care, get in the bath and never come out. Like we kind of pivot between those two. So I just want to hear how you came up with that name or why you felt like Happier Hustle was, I suppose, what you wanted your business to embody.
That's a great question. So I knew I didn't want to use my name. I don't know why, but my gut and my intuition just said, that's not what you want to do. And I was like, okay, this is going to get confusing, but I'm going to let you guide the way. And I grew up with my grandmother who actually passed away this last December. And
I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank you. And she is an internment camp survivor. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, so she always told us growing up until literally she passed away, just go be happy, go find your happiness. Like that was the running theme throughout our lives. It wasn't about go be successful or make this much money or do this or that. It was just go be happy. And it was interesting to look back in hindsight with that. So that's where that word came from. And then the hustle came from, as a cancer survivor, I didn't want to go back to the hustle. And then I read a quote by Brene Brown. It said, you either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness. And I was like, that's what I've been doing. Oh my God.
Brene Brown is amazing. I love her.
Yeah.
Happier Hustle. I love that. And I love that there is a story behind it too. You were just like, oh, sounds cool. HH, we've got alliteration happening.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. And so you touched on the fact that you are a cancer survivor. So I would love to talk a little bit more about that. My dad actually has terminal cancer. And I feel like it's like I don't know if this is insensitive, so please correct me, but I feel like it's almost a club that you join when someone in your life has cancer because you have no idea what it is actually like or the impact that it has on people's lives who are diagnosed with it and loved ones around them until it happens to you, and then you see it everywhere. So I feel like I can definitely relate to you more than I would have been able to a year ago. But I suppose tell us through your story and how the Happier Hustle came to be.
Yeah. So Olivia, you're spot on. It's a club that you join and you really don't want to be a part of. But when you join, you find out the people are incredible.
Yeah.
And so I am a 3-time cancer survivor from acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And I was diagnosed on February 14th, 2014.
Wow.
I know. Happy Valentine's Day, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's so romantic. Thank
I know.
you.
Well, I spent it in the ER, so
Mm,
and that started the almost 5 year journey of surviving, literally. So the protocol that they put me on is 18 months long, just to start with.
mm, yeah.
So 4 months into my treatment, I had a stroke from the
Oh,
chemotherapy.
Jesus. Yeah.
So I had to relearn how to use my entire left side, like talk, eat, walk, type, everything. And then fast forward, finished the 18 months of treatment. Meanwhile, went back to work and 7 weeks later relapsed the first time.
Oh.
And yeah, just right when I was like, oh, let's plan a vacation.
Mm,
Nope.
nope.
So, yeah, my doctors told me my body was no longer responding to chemotherapy. We've got this alternative. Do you want to try it or a clinical trial? And I was like, well, let's try the alternative because it doesn't disqualify us from, or me, I should say, from the clinical trial. And it failed. It was an immunotherapy that I ended up almost dying from again.
Oh my gosh.
And thankfully did not. So then we went on, did all the testing for a clinical trial. A week before I was supposed to start, it got shut down.
Oh my God.
So, so I'm sitting there going, okay, well, now what? Like just assuming there's more things to do. And they said, well, there's one other clinical trial going on right now for what you've got. It's full and there's no line skipping. So you kind of have to wait and that doesn't guarantee a spot for you. So I was like, that's not promising. I'm like, so anything else, And they're like, well, no, not really. So I'm in the hospital for like weeks. Finally, they come to us, and I say us, my husband at the time and myself, and say, well, we've got this immunotherapy that's not for your cancer, but do you want to try it? With 2 pages of research. And I'm sitting there going like, oh, this isn't enough data. There's 114 participants. That's it.
Mm,
And the outcomes were not good. And I was like, I don't know. They were like, okay, well, think about it and let us know. I was like, what? This is how we're doing this now? You're letting me guide this? I'm like, I didn't go to medical school. So
I don't want to be a guinea pig.
right. So after some very deep contemplation, I decided that even if it didn't work for me, they could use the data to potentially help someone else. And so,
Oh, that's
yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. And so then we wrote a letter of compassion to the FDA and to the drug manufacturer to receive it. Thankfully, we did about 2 to 3 months later. I went through 4 rounds of that. It worked by some miracle. And then so we went to a stem cell transplant immediately. So I went through all that. And then 6 months later, relapsed again.
Oh, yeah.
And we were like, okay, are we doing another transplant? Are we doing immunotherapy? And they're like, let's try the immunotherapy and see what happens. So we did that, got into remission. And we literally for 6 months were like fingers crossed.
Mm,
They didn't give me like the clear of can I go live life or anything for like 6 months. They were like, well, we're still waiting. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, how long?
yeah. Yeah. No, I was gonna ask, I'm curious, like, is that it last time?
Yeah, that was thankfully it because literally I didn't have any gas in the tank to really get through that last one. Um, what really did push me in that moment because I when they told me I relapsed again that last time, I looked at my husband and I mean I burst into tears and I said I can't do it. I can't. I wasn't physically in a position to. I mentally was so already exhausted and beaten down. And I looked at him, I said, I can't do it. And he goes, whatever you decide, we'll do. So then I don't know how long I sat there and cried. I really don't. But I looked back up and, the one thing that popped into my head was, your dad would be so disappointed in you if you didn't give everything you had. And so I said, universe, I hear you. I go, but this is it. This is the last time. And I go, it's not for me. I go, I don't care if I live or die. I go, but people around me do. So it's for them. And so I did that last time for them. And fingers crossed, still in remission 5 years later.
Yeah, that is amazing. I'm so happy to hear that you're in remission after going through all of that. And it's awful at the same time because I'm sure you have that fear of like, what if something changes tomorrow?
Right.
It is an awful club. Mm-hmm. Like there's nothing that'll put you in the present moment like cancer and a diagnosis like that. How long was that process from your first diagnosis in 2014 till being in remission?
It was about 4 years. And it was an exhausting process. So I'm thankful to be done. My doctors still don't understand how I'm alive to this day and in this good of a health, because they're like, based on your numbers and your labs, you are like a normal human.
Yes. Oh my goodness. What's the secret? Is there anything you feel like you've done in order to maintain that level of health?
I'm extremely dedicated. I don't have the strictest diet. I follow like an 80-20 rule, but I'm dedicated to exercise. I'm dedicated to the process. And I have, in the last 2 years, because the more research that I dive into, really gone into like healing trauma because of all the evidence that is pointing to leading to illness and disease. And I'm like, I'm not doing this again.
Yeah.
As you can imagine.
Yeah. I can't imagine it would have been a fun 4 years. 4 years is such a long time to be sick as well. Like every day feeling unwell or, and it's not funny that you say that, but my dad had a similar experience where he started chemo and radiation, but the chemo caused him to have heart problems and to have blood clots. And it's like, it starts with one thing and then it's like just it takes you through the ringer for sure. And you're like, this is making me sick, but it's making me better. It's like a whole sort of mind fuck almost of like what is going on. So I can imagine 4 years of that. He's about a year into his cancer journey. Like you would just be like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm doing like anything other than this. I'll drink the kale smoothies or meditate or do ayahuasca. Yeah, whatever we need to do.
Right. Exactly. It's so funny because it's an endurance race. Like this is like a 90% mindset. Like you don't know how long you're in it, and you are never really out of it. Like it's a piece of you that will always stay. And it's like, that's why I'm so dedicated to the process. It's like, I'm not putting myself through it, let alone my family again. Like, and so I've really taken on the mindset of, I just have to stay alive long enough for the next thing, right? Like they're developing new cancer drugs every single day, and I just have to be alive for that next one.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I think there's a gift in, sometimes it's hard to find, but there's a gift in being that present and learning that you only are ever guaranteed today anyway. So we may as well make the most of it and do what we love. And especially if we are well enough to enjoy it, because sometimes it's not the case. So one of my questions is, what did having cancer and your diagnosis teach you about living?
That we only have so much time, and everyone is so paralyzed by fear and what other people think. And sometimes we just have to do the thing, because the entire time that I was thinking about, like when they told me to go settle affairs, when we didn't know, and we were in so much unknown, the only thing that I wanted was to be around my family, the ones who love me, to love on them, to love me back. And I didn't think about the things that I was going to not do. I thought about all the things that I regretted not doing. And I don't want to wake up in 20 more years and going, oh boy, I wish I would have done this. I'm doing it, success or not, or fail or not, like I'm doing it. And that's like, it's propelled me to go surf, and I'm terrified of the ocean. Not a great swimmer, like all these things now, if like really it's pushed me to just go, you're going to be scared and uncomfortable regardless. Just go do it. And if it doesn't work out, try something else. Like,
Yeah, I love that perspective. And I've I've heard like that it's actually important for us to have a reminder every day that we are not going to live on this planet forever, because it does put everything into perspective. It's like, here I am worried. I'm going to be worried about surfing when I've survived cancer 3 times. Come on. You know what I mean? Like it just puts things into clarity, and that life is really short, and if we're healthy, and why not?
right. And if you think about it, and this is like something that I contemplate all the time, today is the youngest you'll ever be again. Like, this is it. This is
Now's the
it.
time. I
Yeah.
know. Oh, it's crazy. It's good. I'm gonna like bookmark this episode for myself, and anytime like because and the thing is, like, you can go through an experience like that and you can have these thoughts, and then you're still gonna have those days where you're so caught up in being emotional about, oh my God, the dog shit on the floor, or like, you know what I mean? Like, the coffee machine's broken, my life sucks. Like, it's being a human.
Yeah.
But it's good to remember. So I feel like I'm going to bookmark this for those times when I'm just having a human moment and be like, come on, Olivia, like, let's wake up, let's go do things.
Right. And we're all, and that's the thing, like we're all human at the end of the day. And I'm not perfect, and nor am I going to pretend to be anymore. And I think that was the biggest lesson for myself personally, is to lead an authentic life that's for me and not for anyone else. Not to check the boxes of life, not to do all these things that we're so quote unquote supposed to do. It's to lead a life that I want and I love.
Yeah, powerful. And if anyone's listening to this and they love the idea of authenticity, obviously go follow Casey. But Brene Brown talks about this a lot, and I'm obsessed with everything that she puts out. And I think living an authentic life can really change everything, honestly. Um, I would love to talk a little bit more about what it is that you do, and specifically about the connection with our health and our mindset. So I know you said you were starting to look at the role of trauma and the way that that gets held in the body. There's a really amazing book called The Body Keeps the Score, which I haven't read, but I've recommended to a lot of people. A friend of mine has an injury, and like any spiritual crazy person, I'm like, it's in your mind. You just need to heal your trauma. So I'd love to like just get a little bit woo or get deep into this topic, and hear, as someone who has been through what you've been through, hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have asked me, prior to cancer, if trauma played a role in disease, I would have probably said no. But the more you become aware, the more you start to dive into the research, the more you can't ignore it. And The Body Keeps the Score, Vander Kolk, he's an amazing pioneer in this research, and it's actually where I'm certified for
Oh,
trauma.
cool.
Yeah, so he's got an institute that he does. Because it's true, like our brain has the ability to block out trauma. It's got components and pieces inside of it that help us endure even the worst of the worst. But our bodies don't have that same filtration system. So everything from the time we were born, and even prior to the time we were born, ancestral trauma can be passed down through DNA, just based on that. And everything up until this day, big T trauma, meaning like something like cancer, versus little T trauma, something like the little boy on the playground said you had a big forehead and now forever will have bangs, like
Yeah.
our body holds that in. And unless we start to heal that, like it dysregulates our nervous system and it starts to stress us out. Our immune system ends up being compromised, like a whole host of things are going on underneath the surface that we can't see and we'll never see, but are happening.
Yeah. And I think that's why sometimes we hear of situations where, I mean, I can use for example, I had a lot of trouble, particularly growing up until I was about 2021, where I would not feel my emotions. Like I avoided emotions like they were the plague. I wasn't really taught how to process any emotions. So anything that was uncomfortable, like anxiety or fear or disappointment, weren't in my field. I just would feel them. I'd push them away. And then all of a sudden, I woke up one day and couldn't get out of bed. And we hear about this a lot because it's like, it starts off as a coping mechanism, but it gets stored in your body and in your psyche over time until one day you're like, whoa, why is my back so sore? Or why do I have so much anxiety I can't leave the house? And it's because your body just reaches a point where it's like, oh, we can't do this anymore. And so you might be thinking, well, are there signs beforehand? And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's like that saying, the universe will throw a pebble at you, and if you don't pay attention, it'll throw a rock. And then if you're still not listening, it's going to chuck a massive boulder at you until you just stop and slow down and realize what's going on.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it's true. Like I grew up in a house where you didn't have emotions. You didn't talk about it. You didn't feel it. You were like a robot. So I didn't understand the concept of like, oh, people cry when they feel hurt. Like it's so
Yep. Vibes.
Right.
I know.
Yeah.
Same.
So
I feel like you have to grow up in that in order to understand that it's like, oh, when I'm sad, I feel that. I don't just immediately shut it down and move on. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely like and there's a lot of people that have grown up that way because back in the day there was a book that came out, a parenting book or something that was I think it was actually first published in the 40s and 50s or something, but didn't popularize until the 70s, which is where a lot of our parents were raised in that style of parenting. Hence the reason why we're raised in that style of parenting.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, something of it. I don't know the name, but it's the theme is children are meant to be seen, not heard, which means we don't have feelings, we don't have a voice, all of these other things.
No, it's my mum has said that to me word for word. She's like, I grew up and said that was the vibe. Children are meant to be seen, not heard. But I didn't put that connection together that because they were raised that way, we were raised that way. And now it's like, I feel like there's then now this whole shift towards gentle parenting and listening to children's emotions and letting them talk it through. It's like that flip. So I'm curious to see what, this generation of children, how they raise their children and what like society will look like. But I'll have to read it now that we've spoken about it. I'll actually read The Body Keeps the Score because I love books where they talk about it from a research point of view and it's not just spiritual. It's like, no, it's a fact that if you do not process your trauma, your body will physically store that and it will show up in an ailment of sorts. Have you read Dying to Be Me?
No, I have not.
You should read that.
Okay, I'm going to write it down.
This afternoon. Yeah, it's by Anita Morjani. And it's called Dying to Be Me. She had cancer, like terminal sort of cancer, and died. And then it's a spiritual perspective. She talks about how she connected with spirit and had this sort of realization that because of the way that she had experienced trauma and was dealing with her emotions in the past, like holding on to that was like keeping her sick. And so she went into remission like overnight, essentially, after she had like this spiritual awakening. So it's not backed in research, but it is backed in her experience, which is insane. But yeah, it's interesting how much this is starting to pop up and that people are becoming more and more open-minded to that connection between the mind and the body.
Right. And even there's a book that Dr. Mate just came out with, The Myth of Normal. And that's along the same lines of like the body keeps the score, a lot of evidence-based research compiled in one place. Like I'd never seen it before. And it's like you can't
Wait, what's that called? I'm writing it down.
The Myth of Normal by Dr. Mate is his last name. It's an easy read because he wrote it with his son who put some like normal, it's not just like data. It's not like that. It's very relatable. There's a lot of social references that you're like, oh, that's kind of funny that you put that in there. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Kind of like, I feel like, have you read The Glucose Revolution?
No, I've not. Interesting. Okay.
You have to. That's another one to add to the list. Yeah, it's just a book club, this whole episode. I love it. She outlines her research in a way that's also interesting because she talks about the connection between what you eat and how your body, which is massive, and we can start to talk about essentially. She talks about like when you eat foods in a certain way, and it's crazy because she goes so deep into the science behind it that like if you eat carbs before you eat like vegetables, or if you eat sugar before vegetables, for example, your body will actually release free radicals, which can cause cancer. And so you can imagine after my dad, I said to my dad after he got cancer, I'm so annoyed at you now. Every time I go to the doctors, I have to tick family history of cancer. Like now I have to deal with this because of you and like take care of myself. So annoying. But like doing all the research to make sure that I'm keeping my body really healthy. And this was just such an interesting perspective, the role that inflammation from what you eat can play in like mood disorders or back pain or just like a whole Alzheimer's, like it affects everything. So I'd love to hear your take on the role between diet as well and how our body and our mind work.
I couldn't agree more. What I even run little mini experiments on myself because I like using myself as a guinea pig. No one gets hurt in the process.
Yeah, sure.
So I typically follow basically an anti-inflammatory diet. I'm plant-based pescatarian. I just love fish so much, like I can't let it go yet. And so
I feel like that about cheese.
I like
some things that just it's worth it.
right. And like following a diet that's so rigid that you can't enjoy food anymore isn't really realistic either, in my mind. Like I think you should be allowed to, as long as you're following 80% of the time. Why wouldn't you be able to indulge every once in a while? Like it's not going to ruin the progress that you've made or everything that you've done. It's just, we're human and we're allowed to from time to time. But I agree. It's one of the big reasons why I don't drink is because I just noticed the sugar from alcohol or sugar in general the next day made me feel more agitated. I had a lack of clarity of thinking. My body felt swollen. It felt sluggish and tired. Like I literally like mapped out how I felt the day before, ate something and not even a lot. Like we're talking one glass of wine and like a chocolate dessert and that was it. And I could feel because I'm so aware of what's going on in my body, I'm acutely aware of what's happening when I'm putting things that I shouldn't be eating inside of it. My anxiety spiked. My sleep wasn't great. I like all of these things as a byproduct of just doing a mini experiment on myself. I ate clean for 2 weeks, then had one night where I had one glass of wine and a chocolate dessert, and I could feel it. And I was like, whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's so, anyone listening, like, I feel like it's so important to do that because you might hear that and be like, oh, well, can't have chocolate pudding anymore. And it's like, no, the point is to tune in with your body and see what your body enjoys and doesn't enjoy and craves and what makes you. I think for me, I'm trying to think for me, if I eat a lot of, I'm kind of gluten-free, not really. I also find if I stress too much about what I'm putting in my body, that causes me to be inflamed sometimes more than the food. Like oh my God, I really want this piece of bread, but I can't have it because then I'm going to feel X, Y, Z versus I'm eating and I'm enjoying it and I'm moving on. So that's also like interesting. But yeah, like the point is to have that mind body connection and really tune in with what makes you feel good and what doesn't.
Right. And you know, that's the thing. Like you understand the stress even causes inflammation, and it does. It can affect your physical body because it's cortisol and adrenaline you're shooting through it. It mimics a lot of the effects of the food that we eat that inflame the body. And it's crazy that like our mind and body are so connected in that way of like, I notice if I'm not as on point with my diet, like my anxiety starts to go back up. And I'm like, I haven't had anxiety in years. Like, why do I all of a sudden feel agitated more than usual? And I'm like, oh, I know why.
Yeah, yep. It's that little reminder. Yeah. And exercise can be a similar thing. I was having a conversation with someone about this, and I had a little gym phase where I was like lifting weights, and I found that it just put too much stress on my body, and that my body just feels leaner and like flowier and less bloated if I just go for a walk and don't like stress. Like everything just feels better. And so I think that's another thing. It's like finding that balance between, and this is different for everyone, because for some people, having a strict routine feels really good and checking that off feels really good. So, it's tricky because everyone's different, but it's a fun little experiment you get to play with yourself.
100%. Like I personally, like I've done Pilates. I think it's really hard for period. Like it's like a level of discipline that I just don't have. Like I need to move heavy things to whereas like somebody
Mm.
else's body, they're like, I love Pilates. It's really gentle. And I'm like, I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other than I think it's really hard to like micro, and I think that's the difference. It's like those micro movements that you're just like so acutely aware of in that moment versus like when you're lifting heavy, you are aware of what your body's doing, but it's a different connection.
Yeah. I totally see what you mean. Yeah, and I love that everyone's different. Everyone has their things, and as long as you've got some sort of practice that you're aware of and conscious of, and I think that's important. Or you're making a choice. You're not saying like, I'm taking it easy today and I take it easy every day. It's like, no, I had a busy day yesterday, so now I'm like letting my body relax or whatever it is. Discernment is really important.
Right. And that's why I love yoga so much. It's not so much of what you could do yesterday and or tomorrow. It's like your body literally, what can it do right now? And if it's not doing the same pose it did yesterday, like that's cool. Like allow it to do its thing. It is tuning into a level of awareness where I'm like, how is it that yesterday I did a handstand and today I can't even do a plank? Like what's going on?
Yes, no, I feel that. Honestly, it is exactly like that. So, I feel like we should shift gears. Tell me, what is it you're currently passionate about, whether it is in life or in business? What's lighting you up? What's keeping you up at night? Tell me all about it.
There's a lot keeping me up at night. No, I I am extremely passionate about helping women thrive. Like, I genuinely believe like the minute you hear those words, you have cancer, it changes your life and in so many ways that you don't expect. And to help someone pick up the pieces in a much faster and more efficient way than I had to, it lights me up because that means to me that person's out there living their best life again. And I couldn't ask for anything else. So that's what's lighting me up right now is just working with the women that I work with and through my survivorship program, A Happier All Through You, physically, mentally, and emotionally taking back control of their health and without fear and anxiety is really what's lighting me up now. I'm diving into a lot of research on trauma and, not only my own trauma of cancer and childhood, but I'm diving into ancestral trauma and how that impacts our DNA and our life, whether we realize it or not. It is impacting ourselves, before we even are here on this earth. And so that's what I'm diving into for fun.
Yeah, I love that.
I know. Like, it's like, you do that for fun. Yeah. Do you see the books I read like at night? Like you'd be like, what? I'm terrified. And as far as fitness goes, I'm learning how to surf. I started the
Ooh.
end of last year. Yeah. And it terrifies me because I'm not a great swimmer.
Hmm.
And the ocean scares me to death because there's like real live things that can kill you.
Oh yeah. It is. I want to learn how to surf, and I'm terrified of sharks. I think that's what it is because like when you have to surf, you actually go far out enough where they could just be chilling and you can't control that. So I haven't gotten that far yet, but it's on my list. But maybe I should just do it. Like you said, if I'm going to be scared anyway, may as well. I'm not going to
Yeah.
wake up tomorrow and be like, now's a great time to go swimming with sharks. Like,
That's the truth. And that's the thing. Like I mean, I didn't go out and learn by myself. I got an instructor.
yeah.
So I knew that I would be safe. That's the only recommendation is make sure you go with somebody who knows what they're doing and
Yeah.
can guide you every step of the way because I just was like, I'm so scared. I've got to do this. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, like, it's just like, I talk about fear and anxiety and how I don't live with it, but I'm not doing the one thing that scares me. What is wrong with me? And so I dove in.
Mm,
I just was like, book it, found it, let's go. And
done.
then, yeah, so I actually just went last Sunday again, and there's something so cathartic about being out there with people, but you're alone. And
Mm,
it is truly like you're reading the ocean, you're riding the waves, you're trying to figure out something that every moment is changing and evolving. And it's like just an experience. I can't relate to anything else because with sports, there's always a methodology. If you play basketball, just shoot the basket and the ball or the ball in the basket 100 times to get
mm,
good at it, right? It's just repetition. But with surfing, it's so much more than that. And
mm,
there's like a level of not having control is what it
mm.
is, that you just have to surrender and
Yes.
let the ocean wave push you to get up. And it's like that's what it is. It's the lack of control.
Yeah, surrender. I love that word as well.
Yeah.
I've had friends in my life who are like surfers, and I feel like the funny thing is you can go out there and sit and wait for waves, and sometimes they just don't come, and you just have to like, it's like maybe it'll be this one, maybe it won't be, and I love that flowy perspective and just presence as well. It's cool. This is inspiring me, and I just have to say I loved when you said I'm so terrified of it, so I have to do it. Like,
Yeah.
oh, what a way to live your life, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about to go out
mean,
and jump out of a plane or something after this podcast episode.
or if it scares me wanting to do it, and that's kind of like how I started this, like my making decisions in my life. Like I grew up, born and raised in Chicago, and I just after cancer, I was like, I'm going to go live in California. I'm in California now. Like my family isn't, no one's here. And I was just like, you know what? Like everything that scares me or that I would hesitate before, I'm just doing. And even if I decide tomorrow to leave California and go back to Chicago, to me, it's not a failure. It's just like, what is this season of life pushing me to do? And it's just evolving. And I'm letting kind of my intuition lead the way for the first time ever. And it's kind of taking me in some directions I never expected.
Which is fun. I like that. The control freak in us goes, oh, but it's so good for you to surrender. Like you said, it's a really good skill to have because sometimes life just throws you in one and you're like, well, I'm here now, so I've got to figure it out.
That's the thing. Like we try and micromanage and control everything, but it still doesn't always go the way we want. So why not allow, like I would say I was probably a perfectionist, a control freak before cancer, and then cancer kind of made it a little bit worse. But now I'm like, yeah, I control my day to day to a certain extent, but I allow for, if all of a sudden my intuition is like, you could go to the ocean, to just follow it. And it makes no sense sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. So juicy. Okay. Last question. What is your crystal vision for the future? So without revealing too much, what is it that you're working towards now so that in a few years' time we'll be able to listen back and say, she manifested it all?
That is such a great question. I would love to be on a public stage in some sort of way without revealing what it is that I'm working towards.
Yes, public stage. I love it.
Yeah,
Sharing your story, inspiring people all over the world. I can see it. I see the vision.
So I'm that's what I'm working towards. And that would
Yes.
be amazing.
I love it. Okay, is there anything that is like coming through from the universe that you want to share with our audience? Anything I didn't ask you?
I don't think so. It's just, the biggest thing that kind of popped into my head is we have every reason to be scared. We have every reason to fear the judgment and what others have to say about a life they're not living.
Yeah.
But you have to decide what life you want to live.
Yes.
And I think letting that guide you is really living in your authenticity is really what it's about.
Oh, what a perfect way to close off the episode. Thank you so much for being so authentic and vulnerable with us and sharing your story. I can really feel your energy and you're just a beautiful soul. So I'm so grateful to have had you on. Where can we go hang out with you?
So you can find me on Instagram or Facebook at Be Happier Hustle. And you can also find me on my website, www.behappierhustle.com.
Perfect. All the links will be in the show notes as well. So just swipe up and you'll see it. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and to share your story. I feel so inspired now. I'm going to go and listen to some music and be present. So thank you. And thanks for coming.
No, thank you for having me. I'm truly grateful to be here.
Perfect. All right. See you guys next episode.